Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode. In today's episode, I am going to have a guest on that we've seen before, or heard before on the podcast. That is Vince Martinelli. He is the head of product and marketing at RightHand Robotics. Last time we spoke to Vince was at Modex, actually, and we were actually in person, believe it or not. Hard to believe at this point. But that was back in March, probably a week before everything kind of shut down. So we're going to catch up with Vince, see what's been going on with RightHand Robotics through the pandemic and what they're kind of seeing on their end in terms of how business is doing, and also what kind of is the future in terms of what's 2021 look like for automation and robotic automation specifically. So Vince, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, very good. Thank you, Kevin. It's good to talk with you again.
Good to talk with you again, too, as well. So we've had you on the show, I think, twice now. I think we spoke at ProMat, also Modex, maybe somewhere in between as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit. I was looking at your LinkedIn last night, actually, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. It's a pretty interesting background. You went to MIT, and then it looks somewhere along the lines you owned a coffee shop or something, and then you kind of ended up over on the marketing side too. So talk to us a little bit about your career and how that kind of happened.
Sure. Well, early on, coming out of school, I was with large companies early in my career. Actually spent quite a while with Corning in the fiber optics business.
Right.
And then started getting into some startups, starting with a networking systems company that did pretty well. And after that, I had a little money in my pocket, I guess, and decided to do what every engineer secretly wants to do, go start a coffee shop and, have an easy life sitting there reading magazines and having coffee all day, and watching other people work. I can tell you it's not quite like that, because we were open 365 days a year, and I was there, 12, 15 hours a day. And so by comparison, selling warehouse robots is a lot easier. But I did get to polish my barista skills, so I can still make a decent cappuccino when called on. And what else? So you learn some lessons about customer service. I think I skipped that part, in high school when a lot of folks work fast food places and things like that. I had some other jobs and didn't do that. But you learn a lot about customer satisfaction, dealing with people of all types. Coffee shop, you never know who the next person's going to be.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw that. I was actually, I was a little surprised. So, but it's interesting how the journey works out. I'm curious. Actually, I have some college age listeners that listen from my alma mater that I know of, and how do you, maybe you said you kind of were working for big corporations when you kind of started out, and then you transitioned to startups a little bit. How do you kind of make that transition, do you think, in your career for some students that might be interested in working for startups?
Yeah, well, actually, one thing that was common for me whether it was the larger companies or startups, it's always done the new product side of the house. In particular at Corning, actually, I worked in sort of a internal incubator group where we were, our charter was to look at different business opportunities and, gin up a business case and try to make a decision about whether to invest or not. Actually, it was great practice for startup world and so on. So I don't know, maybe if you think you're interested, you can obviously try to join a startup right out of school.
Right.
On the other hand, get some experience somewhere, learn a bit about, I don't know, how businesses go about things and how things work. And if you're in a innovative culture at a big company, it's a good entry point. Maybe you can transition later on when you find something you're really excited about.
Gotcha. So did you find that working at those big corporations gave you a lot of skills that you could apply to the smaller, like, startup atmosphere?
Yes, definitely. In fact, well, in that era, larger companies would also invest quite a bit in training time. Maybe some do still, I don't know. I think we were required at one point to spend 5% of our time in the year, in training programs, and there was budget for that and so on and so forth. So, I took some executive MBA classes and all kinds of things, really. So that was great, too. It was a great benefit of a larger company.
Interesting. Good to know. Yeah. I think it's pretty interesting every time you kind of find out somebody's journey of how they ended up where they are. So I'm happy you could share that with you. And when I saw the coffee shop, it piqued my interest a little bit. I was curious.
And if you go run a coffee shop, you learn everything about operations, sales and marketing, customer service, equipment fixing, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, you kind of do it all, right? So.
Yes.
All right, cool. So you've been on the show a couple times, but I guess for maybe some new listeners, people that haven't listened to the old episodes, why don't give us just a kind of a brief overview of what RightHand Robotics is and what it is you guys do?
Yeah, sure. Well, in a nutshell, RightHand Robotics builds a data-driven, intelligent picking platform. It provides flexible automation, it's scalable, it's for predictable order fulfillment. So that's kind of the long form. If I had to break that down a little bit, we make an autonomous piece picking machine. As a autonomous vehicle is to a regular car, an autonomous picking robot in a warehouse is to a factory robot. It's a robot that sees and makes decisions real time through its software, through the AI, about how to pick things out of totes from systems in warehouse, for example, and place them into outbound order containers of one type or another. That's what we do.
All right, great overview, and it's I will testify that is what you do because I've seen it at Modex and ProMat Live. So it's a very interesting setup as well, and I think one of the things you guys won the award at ProMat last year, 2019.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely an innovative product and something that's kind of changing the picking automation world a little bit as well. So I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about the last time we spoke, like I mentioned, was in person actually, which is really crazy to say, I guess. But how has business been through you guys through the pandemic? Has there been more interest in what you guys do? Or what do you think it's been like?
Yeah, well, it's been a tricky year, I think. In the immediate period after Modex and in the first couple months there, I think there's a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
And so we had projects that we had been working on with people, some of which, went on pause for a bit, making it challenging. I think one of the things that it's really prompted this year, I talked about this robot, again, that can pick from totes in a warehouse. And we had been developing fleet management tools, remote visibility and control, both within the warehouse or also tools for remote support and so on, data analytics, dashboards. We showed some of these things at Modex and, at varying states of product readiness, if you will. But boy, we got pushed pretty hard because with travel restrictions, and it's hard to get our people to facilities to maintain and install and support production robots and so on. So we've really had to kick that work into gear a little bit more this year than we might have expected. Again, it's kind of just easier if you have your own people in the facility all the time. Sometimes they can make things happen without the need for a sophisticated tools. Whereas if everybody's remote and scattered around the country in their respective homes, you still have to support the customers remotely. So So that was a big change that we've been working on. And then, as we've gotten later into the late summer and into the fall, we see this change where folks running warehouses, in particular for e-commerce, it's been stunning growth this year in a number of categories there, including grocery, for example. But these guys are saying, with that kind of growth over the next few years, what if we have to keep employees, separated in the workplace in order to, deal with COVID protocols and everything else. So I think the end is as we look toward 2021. So yeah, we have a nice backlog of interest and projects and things we're working.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that, like you said, it sounds like what I've kind of heard from some other companies too is like you had some things in the works, like you were talking about the remote ability to support and those things. So it sounded like they were in process, and so it kind of accelerated the demand for that. Did you find that it really kind of pushed your technology forward in a way because of that demand? Yes.
And again, we're always pushing ahead on some of the core skills. I like to think of this autonomous picking machine as having a set of skills, capabilities. It's nice to think of skills, something you practice and learn and get better at. So picking objects is one skill set. Picking them in different sort of configurations and totes, and I don't know how they're presented to the robot. The subtle differences. In fact, again, sometimes I'll when I have folks on a call, and actually anybody can do this at home right now. If you're listening to this, look at the desk or the table in front of you, wherever you are. Pick something out that you want to pick up. Look at the thing. Decide how you would go and grab it. Then close your eyes and grab it, paying attention to how your arm moves, how your wrist turns, and whether or not you succeed and pick it up on the first try. You try this with 2 or 3 items, even the same item, if you orient it different ways, turn it 90 degrees and try it. You'll find you had to make an entirely different set of motions to go grab the object, right? And your vision system and your mechanical gripping system is really pretty good. But with your eyes closed, it may not be perfect. You may have to fiddle with it just a little bit to grab, right? So there's a lot of elements of that in an autonomous picking machine. How does it visualize the scene? Decide what to pick. Then there's sort of a separate task of plan how you're going to get there and grab the item. It's like picking blind in a sense at that point. The robot isn't constantly looking and evaluating while it's moving, typically. It grabs a scene, decides what to pick, and goes for it, right? And yet the same item picked 5 times from the same tote, each one is a unique set of motions to get it because they're at different positions in the tote or different orientations of the item, right? They're subtly different. So talking to our CTO recently, I said, hey, is it true if the robot works all year in a warehouse that no 2 picks are alike? And he said, yeah, that's probably true. No 2 picks are exactly alike. And that's entirely different from how a factory robot, traditionally works.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because I guess you think about it, and I guess you would think, initially that a pick would be the same because it's the same item, right? But then you got to think about the positioning of the item. That changes the whole different grip and everything. That's really, really interesting.
Yes, and then the skill set, if you care about how you're going to set it down in the other container and so on, it's up another level, right? It's another degree of complexity of, how did I actually pick it up and where do I need to put it? Maybe I don't want to set it on top of the other thing I just set there and so on, right? So anyways, as the machine, as we work on things, we continually invest in some of the core skills of the machine because those capabilities apply to most all projects. And then, as I mentioned, the ability to give the customer tools to manage the systems themselves, and also for us to back them up and back up some of the integrator partners we work with. We spent more time on this year than we probably expected. But again, I think in the long run, that's just makes it easier to use the systems in the field.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty interesting to see how everything has kind of evolved, and I think your product is really, really flexible. I mean, even when you see it picking, I think that's that's the one thing. It was kind of like, there's all these robots that are bringing product and moving product, but I think yours is kind of the first that I had personally like initially saw in person, where it's actually like picking the individual piece, which is really, really a big step forward. And, the fact that it's getting so skilled, as you mentioned, to pick up all these different things at different angles. And I love the example that you gave. I think that's really, really good idea of how difficult it is to try and accomplish that. So definitely pretty interesting what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and we find that, again, our system, which picks with one hand, and so we say items that a person could pick and handle with one arm, typically is sort of the size of things we handle. We've found a lot of interest from folks, again, in general e-commerce, but grocery and pharma or products, drugstore type of items, consumer packaged goods, basically smaller items that are shipped, in pretty high volumes in a lot of facilities. Actually, the other thing I should mention, of course, is e-com facilities usually have tens or hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million SKUs. So another thing we've very intentionally designed around is the idea that, we don't have to learn each item. We don't have to really know much about them to pick it. Again, just like you or I would look into a bin of items, and I don't need to know what brand of shampoo it is to pick it, or if it's the 20 ounce or the 16 ounce or whatever. I very quickly assess and distinguish one item from another, make my choice and grab it. The robot's very similar in how it actually perceives and picks it. So it doesn't have to learn things ahead of time, which makes it very robust as the product mix changes, or as you try to take it to different customers in different industries. It's pretty flexible that way.
Great. Yeah. I think the flexibility is definitely key, especially as you're saying, we see the expansion of the number of SKUs that companies are carrying, and then the seasonality of change, and just the overall change of consumer behavior and consumer demand as well. So with that being said, I mean, you mentioned that, back in, I guess, March, April, some projects got put on pause and things of that nature. But as you also said, e-commerce growth has just been extraordinary during the pandemic, because there's basically been no other choice for certain products to get them. You have to get them through the internet. So are you seeing on your end increased investment in robotic automation now that people are kind of, I guess, realizing that this is a little bit of the new normal and this consumer behavior is kind of going to stick for a while?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Mm-hmm. And I think, there are a lot of flavors of robotics and different types of warehouses, but I think it's generally true, at least from not just what I see publicly, but from conversations with colleagues at other companies in the general field. And again, you're probably hearing the same thing from everybody as well. So it seems to be a consistent theme. I think that both the growth and again the need for increased worker safety has pushed the conversation about automation in general and robotics in particular, maybe up more to the C-suite level, as opposed to just being maybe the engineering team within distribution saying, hey, next year let's try this or that. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, hey, this is critical because we got to keep the supply chain and the order fulfillment process running to keep the business alive, and yet we got to do it and maintain worker safety. So retailers of many types, that thought process is visible at their CEO level typically, and that's influencing the direction. Not everything can happen overnight. Projects still take time, but I think we'll see a steady surge in investment over not just 2021, but over the next few years in response to this year's pandemic.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Definitely, yeah, I agree. And I'm curious, what would you say to maybe the listener or the company that's listening that, if they're maybe still on the fence about investing in some type of automation, what would you say that, from my opinion, it's inevitable. I think it's a need, but what would you say is kind of the driving factor?
It's interesting. Actually, back at Modex, I think I gave a talk. One of my colleagues, we have a similar talk where we say if you're going to go down the path of robots, and we focus on piece picking robots, but it's true, I think, of other robotic projects. First things first, you got to really think and understand, what's the business you need, what's the outcome you're shooting for, and are robots the right path or not? They may not always be. And so, but once you've got that kind of teed up, and this will help you understand, do I need mobile robots or picking robots or big tugger robots, whatever's right, what problem are you trying to solve? There's generally several vendors in each space. You can start a dialogue with them. For piece picking bots, we say, look, it starts with the item set, because if you're trying to handle big boxes, or if you were trying to pick furniture or bicycles or something, it's very different from picking the consumer packaged goods I was talking about. And you need a different type of system to do that. I'm not saying one exists to do that, but you would need a different system. But what are the items? What kind of throughput do you need? Because that's important of how you, especially if it's going into an existing facility, you're trying to sort of match a capacity that you're expecting out of the system. Then we talk about integration. How does that software, what kind of APIs does it have? How's it going to talk to my warehouse software system? We say there's about 5 steps to that process, 5 key things that you need to think through. And because the first robot project is going to need buy-in from the IS and IT guys in your company. Of course, finance will have to sign off and understand the ROI. And then the operations at the warehouse, they're going to need to know how to use the tools. Where's the support coming from? All of these things, right? So, when you invest in these things at any scale, it becomes a cross-functional project within the, from RightHand's view, it's our customer's organization, but how they manage and run that project is really, really important to the overall success of the activity. I think people just need to think that through. It's not rocket science. This is basic project, management and how you do these things, but it's worth reminding people that the robots follow that same basic flow. It's really critical.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder there, because I think some people, they get hung up on the idea of robot being such a technical and futuristic thing. But like you said, it's just like a normal project, so you manage it just the same, right? Yeah. So,
we love it. We want people to get excited about the robots, think they're cool and all that. And then there's a point where you say, okay, forget all that. Now let's just get our heads down and work out the project details. The kind of the blocking and tackling of the whole activity.
Right. So you talked about earlier how you guys have kind of pushed forward on like remote application and support and things of that nature. I'm curious, when we talk about needing safety within the operation and the facilities and things of that nature now, and a different type of safety, right? Social distancing, those types of things. Has there been any kind of new applications for your products that maybe was something that was not being used for prior to the pandemic, or a different type of way that a company might be looking at using it?
Yeah, I'm going to say not really. So I think, I've seen articles where some mobile robots or I don't know, sanitizing buildings or things like that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. We've not really looked at that. I think generally the thing that's changed is maybe just the necessity of having space in the building, or keeping some separation for people. Our robot sometimes can help with that approach, but in terms of the kinds of tasks we're being asked to do, it hasn't changed really that much. I don't know. We've not been asked to pick up, a can of Lysol and spray it on something. I mean, part of it, we're a fixed robot, so we are counting on something to bring us inventory to pick, and then the containers that we place to, and they get taken away on a conveyor or something. So we are not roaming around the facility. So in that sense, it limits a little bit of what we can do.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think though that certainly your product helps with the social distancing aspect, because it takes out that person touching, even the idea of contamination through products as well, because the person essentially it's one less touch, right? So there's that as well. Yeah.
I think, Kevin, over time, I've talked to a number of people about, and whether you call it micro fulfillment or as you have different size facilities and you try to get close to customers, and so somebody's got to maybe bring the bag of groceries out to the curb, or someone's got to drive it to somebody's house, and so on and so forth. So having the robot help inside the facility pick and handle items frees up some people to do these other new tasks that were less prevalent before. And some of which, again, you can't automate as easily. So, I don't know, if nothing else, it gives people a new tool, some flexibility, and I think we'll find lots of ways that people use it. And again, we have enough conversations with people. We think that this is potentially a competitive advantage for the guys who get out in front and adopt it, and learn how to make the most of it, like a lot of automation is. So.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. It's all about how you kind of utilize it, and the creativity that you put towards it as well. That helps you really, really succeed in utilizing. Like you said, it's a tool, right? Basically, it may be shiny, fancy robot, right? But it's a tool at the end of the day. So it's really how to use it. Yep. So now we talked a little bit about, what's been happening, I guess, this year, and I think everybody can agree and is looking forward to next year in the hopes that it's totally different, right? So what do you see, what does RightHand Robotics see as what's in store for automation in 2021, and what do you think is going to be happening with automation?
Yes. Well, let's see. I get my crystal ball out for a second, Kevin. Hang on.
Okay.
And but I do think you'll see, there will be projects, probably more so going active in the first half of the year than maybe would have happened. It's always hard to say for sure. Again, for us, some of those, I don't know that they'll all be announced and how other people will do it. But anyways, there will be a lot going on. I think the pace of that, again, depends a bit on how things go through the winter with the pandemic and so on. And but I think, like I said earlier, for us and others, we've made progress. So it's possible to get things deployed and started even without necessarily being able to travel or being restricted in certain ways. So I think that'll be true. And I don't know, I just think we'll see that grow a bit through the year. I think there will be another wave of projects that go in the second half. Maybe, not every business has a holiday peak, so some of those guys can still light up new systems later in the year, even if some retailers would rather do it in the spring. So, but I think we'll see a pretty steady rollout of projects and announcements, and maybe collaborations and between different companies on projects, all of the above. I mean, I again, the exact timing of it maybe depends a bit on how various restrictions are handled over the next, and hey, hopefully there's great progress on vaccines and things that are coming, so that will when that happens, I think it'll really open up the floodgates on projects. It'll be a lot easier to do everywhere. So.
Definitely. Very, very interesting insight there. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And then, obviously, like you mentioned, the vaccine news is very good. Actually, was some today as we're talking today about it. And so I'm curious too. Just as you're talking, I'm thinking, from we've kind of automated, and there seems to be a robot for almost every process out there now. I mean, we've talked to people who are now automating and kind of using drones for inventory control, and we talked about the automation of disinfecting, things of that nature. Do you see anywhere, I guess, in the warehousing distribution flow or operation where there's still like a kind of a hole in the market for automation or robotics?
Well, I'm not sure there's a hole, but there's I think we're still relatively early in the adoption curve,
Right.
Especially for piece picking robots. So some of the mobile robots, again, maybe starting with Kiva, they've been around now, oh boy, almost 15 years probably for Kiva,
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of systems like that, right? There's ones that are more highly autonomous than that as well. I'm trying to think, there's palletizers, depalletizers, and so on. But the individual item picking robots, that's still pretty new. Again, our company's young, and I think this whole industry's, 3-4 years old or so.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we're still early in the adoption curve, and there's a long, well, again, sometimes I think of it this way. People say, if I look ahead to pick a year, 2030, I don't know. And if you said, are there going to be lots of picking robots and lots of warehouses all over the place? The answer is yes. And whereas 5 years ago there was zero, or 3.5 years ago there was zero, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere between zero and a whole heck of a lot is the curve that we're on, right? And so I think every day we try to figure out what's the how do we make that path as frictionless for end customers, and how do we tie in with the ecosystem of system integrators and software providers and consultants and the folks who bring automation together to build fully functioning warehouses. And we just keep trying to figure ways to make that easier, so it's a nice growth curve going forward. So I don't know if there's I think we can imagine the tasks that the robot is likely to be able to do, and there's examples of robots doing it, but again, it's still at a fairly small scale today, but a lot of growth opportunity ahead.
Definitely, yeah, I agree too. I think there's still a lot of growing to do, and like you said, with the adoption, I think things will just continue to improve as well, and we'll be surprised at what we see in 2030. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you said something a little earlier too, which I think is really key to that, and something that I really noticed at Modex was happening a lot was the collaboration and partnership of all these different companies, even robotics companies collaborating with each other, or like you said, system integrators, or even like warehouse management systems, like preparing to be able to integrate with different robotics and automations as well. So I think that's all going to really drive everything forward and kind of innovate as well and help expand it for the greater good.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think that's and it's necessary. For folks who aren't willing to collaborate they'll just limit their own potential, I think.
Yeah.
And from the vendor side, that is, yes.
Definitely. All right. So Vince, thank you so much for coming on this show. Always a pleasure to talk to you. How can people find out more information about RightHand Robotics? Sure.
Well, they can check out our website, righthandrobotics.com. They can follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Any of those are great options. And Kevin, I thank you again. Appreciate being your guest.
Definitely. We'll put all that information on thenewwarehouse.com as well. So Vince, great to talk to you, and hopefully maybe we'll see you at ProMat next year.
Yes, I certainly hope so. I look forward to it.
Definitely. All right. Thanks a lot, Vince.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.